Hello everyone, welcome to this awesome webinar of Professional Diploma Synoptic Assessment. I say awesome because I listened to a webinar the other day and every other word was awesome, so I thought we'd better use it again. Can I just check that everybody can hear me? So just press yes if you can hear me. Yeah, it looks like everybody can hear me. Well, you couldn't in that pause, I know, but it looks like everybody could hear me. We'll just give another minute before we start, just to make sure if there's anybody still logging on. Right, I think it's 6 o'clock, so I think we can start. My name's Alan Dawson. I'm supposed to give you the job title that I do, and I'm not quite sure. I'm a tutor here in General Dog's Body. This is Kay Jones.
Hello there. I'm the Quality Assurance Manager at Premier Training with many years' experience of delivering the internal control unit in previous standards.
Right, so I think we've got everybody here, so we'll get started. Right, so what does the Professional Diploma Assessment cover? Well, you're probably aware that it covers financial statements of limited companies, which, if you're doing the assessment this time, you should have already completed. You should have completed the Management Accounting Decision and Control Unit, and you should have finished the Management Accounting Budgeting Unit. The one that people often forget is the Accounting Control Systems. They don't feel that this is just the add-on, but quite honestly, the Synoptic is based around this unit. So if you haven't read your book on accounting controls, you really need to do it pretty sharpish. This isn't the only thing that it will be covering, because there may be questions from previous levels. So I noticed in the practice one there's a question on passwords. What's the best password? Which of course comes from level 2. So you may be asked questions not possibly directly relating to level 2, but certainly what you did in the past. Right, so the general advice is don't go into the exam without being fully prepared. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, you've got to have the background knowledge. You've got to know the other units that you've already done. You've got to have a good grasp of the accounting control systems. I think you've put it down as accounting control systems. I think it's accounting systems and controls, to be honest. But there we are. One thing that I've just remembered that I should have been telling you, if you've got any questions, just type them in there, because we have another tutor, Sam, who's going to answer your questions. So if you've got a question, just type it in and Sam will answer it for you.
Can I just pop in there, Alan?
You can.
Yeah. If you actually complete the course outline for the synoptic assessment that's set on your student timetables, or your study plan, you will have no difficulty in completing the elements of this synoptic assessment, with the emphasis very much on the accounting control systems.
Okay, right, so you've got to be prepared. You've got to do your homework. So you've got to know your core units in full, in breadth and in depth. Now it says breadth and depth. What you've been doing in the individual units is learning them in depth. So you've been learning the knowledge and basically regurgitating the knowledge in your assessments. The synoptic is in breadth. It's more to do with how you would use the knowledge that you've got according to the scenario. I've said this before, don't neglect the accounting systems and controls unit. That's probably the most important. Just because you've done the other units doesn't mean to say you can just skip over this. This is what it's all about.
Most of you will, I'm sure, already have some background knowledge on how people perceive any written unit, particularly a project. The synoptic isn't the easy option. It's much easier than writing, a 5,000 word report with a range of appendices. So my advice is make sure that, as Alan said, don't go into the exam without being fully prepared. Stick to the scenario. You don't have to show the person who's going to be marking your assessment how clever you are. That won't score you any marks. You need to be sure that you are matching your answers to the scenario and to the given question.
Okay, and the final bit of general advice is analysis is required more than the method. So there are no answers in the book. What you get from the book is how to do the calculations. The synoptic is what you use the calculations for. So I came up with an analogy. If the book were to show you that it's that how to do a weather forecast, then the synoptic is asking you whether you should go to the beach today or not. So you probably need your weather forecast to find out whether it's good enough to go to the beach, but that's not what it's all about. If you just produce a weather forecast, you'll get nothing. The other thing is, of course, is that you'll need to bring in just general things that you do. I mean, if we continue with the analogy, is today a bank holiday? So if it's a bank holiday, then you're probably going to have a lot of people going there. So is it worth going and getting stuck in all the traffic? That's basically the difference between what you've been doing in your individual units and what there is in the synoptic.
In regards to analysis, it is quite simple, really. If you bear in mind that when you are analysing, evaluating or demonstrating, you don't just give a bullet point statement. You need to think of the impact that particular weakness that you've identified has on other areas. So, for example, I'll do a simple one. In, say, the personnel department, there could be a security lock on the door. Invariably, people will pass that information on to other staff members. As you know, sensitive information is contained either on computers, on desks, in filing cabinets. So a simple analysis would be not to say that the key code access is abused, full stop, or the key code access is shared with others, full stop. You need to say the impact that has. Obviously, there could be data protection regulations that are breached. Sensitive information could get into the wrong hands or into third-party hands, which would be, really detrimental and serious for the organisation. So just think it through, base it on the scenario, and don't just think that it's a weakness that you've analysed and you make it basic. Make sure you do a reasonable analysis, at least a sentence or a paragraph, and you should be on the right side of the requirements.
I've just noticed I feel as though I'm falling off the side of the screen here. It's a good job with friends, isn't it?
Definitely.
Right, so if you can't see me, I'll have to put it in there and somebody will have to tell me. Okay, right. So you've got to start with the pre-release material, or even pre-release material. Can I just ask, how many people are actually doing the synoptic? I think it's in 2 weeks' time, the week after next, isn't it? Is anybody actually doing the synoptic this time? Yeah, there seems to be a few.
Quite a few, yeah.
Right, okay. So those people that are doing the synoptic this time, presumably you have got the pre-release material. I'm having trouble with that word, aren't I? Pre-release material. If you haven't, you need to download it now. You get it from the same place where you get the practice assessments from, on the AAT website, if you didn't know. It's really vital that you get that, because you've got to know the business before you go into the exam room. Now, the pre-release material includes a background of the business. So, you know, if you've got a bakery, shall we say, that's producing cream cakes, then that's going to be a totally different kettle of fish, if I can use that word, to a business that makes aeroplanes. So they won't be the same at all. So you need to know what the business is and what it does. And
could I just say there, Alan, you will have to break a lot of the tasks down into various areas. So you do need to know about the size of the organisation. The pre-released material actually gives you everything you need to know, and you can have it, you know, right from the beginning. You don't take it into the exam with you, but it is there available for you. So, you know, really make good use of that and make yourself some sort of structure against the learning outcomes, so that you're not fully trying to think, you know, oh, you can go back to the scenario. So you've not got to retain too much information. You've just got to know, you know, what you're going to experience and where to get at it. So it's like size of the organisation, you know, is it a small structure? Is it a flat structure? That type of thing. I'm sure your course and study books will give you absolutely loads of information. So what I think I would do is I would use the pre-release material to do your own little notes, you know, on the side. We are also issuing our PowerPoint so that you can create that as a handout. And I would use that as well, you know, for your tips.
Yeah, I think what you've got to remember is you can't actually take the pre-release material in with you, but you will have access to it. But that doesn't mean to say you can leave it till you get into the assessment room, because there won't be time to do what you need to do.
Yeah, the problem on time as well is that there's some multiple choice questions that still need pondering over and a little bit of time. But not too much time needs to be wasted on those. You need to make sure that you look at the time allowed, and I think we've got that indicated in our presentation, so that you are giving yourself, you know, 20 minutes or so, whatever that may be, to make sure you do a thorough analysis, evaluation, demonstration regarding which area it is that you're evaluating. So that's very important.
Yeah, I've just seen somebody asking, does everybody sitting the synoptic have the same scenario? Well, yes, they will for this sitting, but as far as I'm aware, it'll be different for the next sitting. So yes, you'll all have the same scenario. Right, so what else should you get from the pre-release material? So what difficulties is the business experiencing? It won't say the business is experiencing these difficulties, but you should glean from the material what the problems are. So if it says the corner grocery shop is going to open next to a big grocery department store like Tesco's, then you know there's got to be some difficulties. If it's going to open up in a little village with half a dozen people in it, then there's going to be problems there. It won't say that this is a problem, but you'll have to decide what the problems are, if there are any. Have any of the problems been addressed yet? Of course, it won't all be in the pre-release material, but there's things like that may be in there. So again, it won't necessarily say this problem has been addressed by that, but it may well say the directors have brought in some manager or other to make things better. So you're going to say, right, well, presumably that manager is going to address the fact that you started up next to a big store of Tesco's.
Yeah, it's the contributing factors, isn't it, with the issues that you're finding, and they may not be apparent. And I don't want to labour the point, but the pre-release material is really what you're basing it on. So, you have got access to that. Just keep referring back to it. Just don't think that, you can answer your question, what I call piecemeal. It must be relevant to the scenario situation, and keep it succinct. Don't go into too much detail, because you will run out of time. And those extra sort of details that you may put in, that are not relevant to the scenario, you obviously won't gain any more marks. So that's another crucial point that you need to bear in mind.
Yeah, I've just realised that you've probably seen me look over there several times. It's not that I'm looking at somebody to prompt me. That's where all the chat is. So I'm just keeping an eye on the chat, see if there's anything that I can help with. Right, who are the main stakeholders? Right, you'll be given a list of personnel. So you need to be familiar with Joe Vlogs, who happens to be the managing director, and I don't know, Julie Waters, who happens to be the admin junior or something like that. So you'll need to know who the people are. Stakeholders, as you already should know, doesn't just mean the people within the business. It will probably mean the banks. Who does it bank with? Is that relevant? Again, it might not show all of them, but these are the kind of things that you should be looking for. Are there any people who've loaned money to the business? Yeah,
another good point, Alan, is also why are the stakeholders interested, in the performance of the business? I.e., Alan's mentioned the bank. So if they had a loan and the company wasn't performing as well as it should do, the bank are going to be concerned that their loan will be paid. So a bank is an external stakeholder, as are customers and suppliers, and the internal ones are usually the managers, the staff, and any stakeholders. So try to differentiate and refer to them as internal, external. That will keep you, on the right path when you're analysing in the different areas of the particular tasks in the scenario.
Right. Okay. Someone has just told me that one of our staff can't see the writing that's coming up. It's actually on a PowerPoint. Can anybody else see the PowerPoint? Can everybody see the PowerPoint as it's coming up? All right. Okay. Yeah. Everybody can. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, that's great. Right. So where was I?
We've done the stakeholders, and you mentioned,
right.
You mentioned personnel previously to that.
Yes. Yeah, this is the same kind of thing. Learn who are the key personnel. You're given a list. I've seen the pre-release material for this scenario. There's a list of personnel on there. I suppose you don't need to know everyone by name, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to know roughly who does what in the business. Right, you're given statement of financial position and a statement of profit or loss. So even before you go in, you can have a few key ratios that you can have ready calculated. You might want to know whether it's. You might want to know if the business is profitable, if it's productive, and if it's efficient. If you don't know what productive and efficient is, then you need to look that up pretty soon.
What I find as well with when you're trying to analyse if a business is profitable, productive and efficient, yes, you've got a scenario, but if you've got, if you work in an office or you've got, quite a high profile job, always sort of put yourself in that scenario, you know, as an employee or a supervisor or manager. It certainly makes it easier, you know, to do your summing up in whether you think the business is profitable, productive or efficient. We can always improve. You know, we often say that, you know, we put a process or a policy in place. Doesn't always work, you know, so sometimes no, it isn't efficient, it's not productive, and it isn't profitable. So it really can be quite simple, and there isn't a great deal of facts and information in the pre-release material for you to be too concerned about, and you've actually got it there available to you on the day. So I wouldn't get too bogged down with worrying, you know, about whether you're going to be hit with something that you don't know about, because you've got that material there, you know, in front of you.
Yeah, just think of what ratios may be useful when you're answering questions in the synoptic. So, you know, you will need to know things like how the finance ratios, the financial position. It may not be relevant, but it may. So just make sure you know these. You don't need to know them to the decimal point, but you need to know whether they're good, bad or indifferent. On the subject of being good, bad or indifferent, I know these the tutor books do have the what's the word I'm looking for? They do have a tendency to say a ratio of such and such is ideal. Well, yes, all right, but take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. If I go back to what I said before, if your inventory turnover, if the book says, well, it's ideally to have, I don't know, 30 days turnover. If you've got a bakery with making bread, a 30-day turnover is not really good at all. On the other hand, if you've got an aeroplane factory and you're turning out aeroplanes every 30 days, then you're doing pretty well. So it depends, again, on the business, and that's why you need to read the pre-release material to make sure you're fully aware of what the business is all about. Okay. Yeah. Right, so I'm not actually going to go through and talk about every learning outcome for every question, but I will put them up on the screen. There's some important words in there, like demonstrate. Now, this is really the code that you've got to learn. There's people who are Premier training students, they have access to our Premier program where it tells you exactly what all these mean. But I'll go through some of them now. Demonstrate. Well, demonstrate means that you've got to provide an answer with some examples. So, why did this happen? It happened because, and then you give some kind of example. Your example might be a ratio, or your example might be something else. It might be an example that you see in the pre-release, or it might be something that comes up in the synoptic assessment itself. Evaluate. Well, that really needs a conclusion. So you have to evaluate to say it's good. You get half marks if you only put good things. You need to find some bad things if it's evaluate. Sometimes it's difficult to find one or the other, but you do need to find one, at least one, and then come to a conclusion. And of course, your conclusion has got to be based on what you've already written. Now, question 1, the student weaknesses from the past experience and the Chief Examiner's report. Students weren't very good at showing the detection of errors, finding out how you could detect errors. So, you know, how would you do it? A lot of them would come from reconciliations. What about your TB? If your TB doesn't balance, then that would show that there was an error. So So how do you detect them? You might be asked about the cash flow. Well, the number of students that have put down in the cash flow, the things like depreciation. Well, as we all know, depreciation is just a paper exercise. There's no cash. Just because you get to the end of the year, you don't find your bank balance has gone down because your car has depreciated another year. So do make sure you think about things like that. Right, the other thing that's not well answered is knowing who's responsible for what. Who makes the decisions? Is it the directors? Is it the shareholders? You need to know that. Directors are responsible for making sure the business runs properly. But do you know what shareholders are responsible for? Make sure you know.
Could I just say there, Alan, a good word to keep in mind when you are even demonstrating or evaluating one of the tasks is to think to yourself impact, the impact that it has. Impact is a small word, it's easy to remember, but it's vital. You know, as I said earlier about analysing, you don't just say what's wrong. As Alan's pointed out, you need to say what the problem is, whether it's good or bad. Even sometimes something that's working well can have an impact financially. It might be okay in other areas. It might be good for one department, but not another. So just think impact and impact abroad, you know, like the breadth of the organisation, compliance, potential for fraud, errors, you know, time consuming, inefficiency, all those type of things. But if you think impact, you won't go far wrong when you're analysing. And it's having a sort of pointing out what's wrong, the impact that it has, and then summing up, you know, how that can be put right or whether it's good or bad for the business.
Right, so for question 1, you should spend 30 to 35 minutes on this task. Some of the tasks have been changed from last time. What you see in the practice material is only an example of what you might get. So don't rely on the fact that question 1 will be as the same as what it is in the practice material. It probably won't be. It may well cover the same learning outcomes, but it may not even have the same format of the question. What we're looking for is a general broad knowledge. Question 2, right, okay, again, I'm not going through each one of these, there's no point. If what you can do, those of you that have registered will get a link to this webinar again, so you can watch it again. Then you can have a look at the learning outcomes if you wish. We've covered demonstrate, evaluate, report budgetary information to managers in a clear and appropriate format. Right, so clear. Make sure that you don't waffle. You should never write down the first thing that that comes into your head. It's always a good idea to have a piece of paper at the side so you can write down your ideas. The exam centre should actually provide you with some papers. You can't take your own, but they should provide you with some scrap paper. Put down your ideas. The idea is to put as many things that you can think of about whatever the question asks. Just put them down quickly. The second thing is that not all of these ideas will be relevant. So therefore you've got to select them. So don't, just because you know an awful lot on, what should we say, confidentiality, if the question isn't about confidentiality, then you won't get any marks for telling us about it. Then there's the appropriate format. If it says you've got to write an email, it's got to look like an email. If it says it's a report, it won't be an extended report, but you should know what a short report looks like. If you don't, then you'll need to go back to your books and make sure you do. Analyse, I don't think we've had that. Analyse, that's a bit like evaluate. Analyse is to look at the good parts and the bad parts, and you may need to come to a conclusion. Calculate that. That stands for itself. But remember that it more than likely won't be to calculate exactly the same way as it says in the book. So if you've got, if your book's told you that 1 + 2 makes 3, then the calculation may well be saying, what do you need to add to 1 to make 3? So it won't be as straightforward, what's 1 add 2? It's unlikely to be. Right, okay, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to mention about the weaknesses. Because this sort of pre-release material, you know, there's everything in there that you need. You will be given, you know, write a report, write an email, whatever that may be. The weaknesses that have been identified from this task have been lack of fundamental understanding. So if you just focus on, if you ask to write an email, as Alan said, make sure that you put it in the right format. Answers don't relate to the scenario. We've covered that and we keep bringing this up. There's no point in giving a really extensive, comprehensive response if it's not relevant to the scenario, or giving a superficial answer that hasn't really got, you know, a conclusion. So it's a structure and a format, a beginning, a middle and an end when you're evaluating. Not extended in any way really, but appropriate to the scenario.
It's important to look at the number of marks available. You will know how many marks it will show you on the when you're doing the assessment, how many marks are available. So if it says state 3 items and there are 3 marks, then you've got a pretty good idea that you're going to get 1 mark for each one that you state. If it says state and explained and there are 9 marks, then you're pretty sure that you probably still only get 1 mark for stating each one, and the other marks are all for your explanations. So 3 marks out of 3 is excellent. 3 marks out of 9, no. So do make sure you read what the question says. There's a couple of things as well. You sometimes need to, some of the questions start with examine. Well, examine, are there any assumptions? And also, what are the assumptions based on? So let's say that your scenario says that the directors have decided that the sales volume is going to go up by 10%. Well, how do they know? How do they know they can sell 10% more next year? So what is this assumption based on that they're going to do it? You know, if it's just a wild guess, why haven't they been selling 10% more this year? How do they expect to achieve this extra 10% growth? The other one is explain. Stick to the question. I think I've covered that before. Oh, there's another one called give your opinion. Well, this is where you can use I think. But it's not just I think because I've got that feeling. It's got to be I think because of what you've written before. If you ever give an opinion, then there must be something else that you've based that opinion on, and the examiner needs to see it. While we're talking about the examiner, do make sure that you use paragraphs. Your answers are in a logical sequence. Examiners are human. They're trying to give marks, but they're under a tight time. They need to get a certain number of scripts marked. And if you've just written a whole lot of prose without any paragraphs, and it's just wandering from one topic to another and then back to the topic, they haven't got the time to go through it and find out whether you've covered everything or not. So do make sure that you use paragraphs, that it's logical, that it's clear, which comes back again to making sure that you write your ideas down, select your ideas, and then organize your ideas before you start writing anything. for this one, you should spend about 25 to 30 minutes on this task. Have you got anything else?
Yeah, I was just about. Yeah, I was going to say that. I don't know whether you've picked it up as we've been going through the learning outcomes, but they're all very similar. They're all based on evaluating and reviewing, analysing, etc. However, all the learning outcomes, you think that you're repeating yourself over and over again, and in actual fact, it's because it's broken down into, say, an accounting system or the staff, or financial data. So don't think because you've answered something in a previous task that, that will sort of stand within another task. I'm not saying it won't be taken into consideration, but try to keep each of your particular areas of the analysis and evaluation, with a relative answer to the scenario for that. That should keep you on track, because you do feel, when I was reading these, I felt that, I've already covered that till I read it again, and it was evaluating the internal control. So, that's what you're looking for, those key elements of the different areas of each of the tasks.
Right, question 3, we've got more evaluation. So you can see that the synoptic is all about evaluating and also giving your opinion on what's good and what's bad. Now, we've always been saying that you've got to write enough, but at the same time, don't write more than you're required. If something says you need to cover 3 points, don't write 6. There's always the chance that the examiner will see you as using what's called the scattergun approach. If you write, the candidate could well write as much as they want about this, hoping that somewhere in what they've written is going to get the marks. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. They'll probably look at the first 3, and if they're good, then you might have got away with it. If they're not the ones they're looking for, and the answer they're looking for is later on, then it won't be marked. So if you do stick to what the question says. If it says 3, do 3.
Could I just put in there, Alan? Another point is in the multiple choice tasks that are not extended writing tasks, don't tick 2 boxes, because if you do, again, you won't get any marks.
Yes, unless there's 2
that need to be ticked.
Yeah, so look at them. I mean, if it says choose 1 from the following, don't choose 2. But then if it just says choose from the following, then don't just tick 1 and think, well, that's it. Just look at the others. Make sure you've looked at the whole question. All the options will be there for some reason or another. They don't just think of something out of the blue. They'll think, well, if they don't understand that, then they will put this answer. If they don't understand that, they'll put this kind of answer. So look at all the options and make sure you choose the best one. In most cases, it should be obvious if you know your stuff.
It's reading the question, isn't it? Read the question carefully and read it, again before you actually start to answer the question. Because they are quite tricky, these learning outcomes, and you do feel that you've covered it previously, but the clue is in the question, really. So I find that now that anywhere in any extended writing task, that's where marks are lost, because the question hasn't been read carefully enough and the key points identified. So take care with that.
Right, so you should spend 25 to 30 minutes on this task. Obviously, if you feel that if it's a multiple choice question and you feel that you've done well after 10 minutes, well, all right, double check. Nobody's going to stop you moving on to the next question if you feel confident, but just make sure that you have answered the question properly. And if you're taking, say on this one, you took 45 minutes, do remember that that means that you've got another 15 minutes off another task. So try to judge how long you're spending on each. It's a good idea to take a watch in with you. If there's usually a clock in the room, but there isn't always. So take your watch, put it somewhere conspicuous for you, so that you can see how long you're spending on each one. You will need to give an answer to all the questions. So if you've got to, there are 6 questions altogether. So if you've got to question 5 and you've run out of time, you're going to struggle if you haven't even started question 6. So spread your time out. Question 4. I don't think there's an awful lot I've got to say about that. Those are the learning outcomes. Oh, we've got a demonstrate there. Do we have a demonstrate before? I think
Yeah,
we did,
we've
yes.
done the demonstration. They're all relatively similar.
Yes.
And I think we have covered about, the weaknesses that have been apparent, which have been giving a superficial answer. You haven't supported any figures with an explanation, sort of why they're used, insufficient calculations to support the response, and not showing how the decision was arrived at. So again, as I pointed out earlier, very similar: demonstrate, evaluate, calculate, analyse. The same process, the same methodology, but applied in a different context. So again, read the question carefully and follow the same principle in the question relative to the scenario, and you'll be fine.
You also need to be exam savvy, if I can put it that way. If there is a question where it specifically says what are the disadvantages, then you won't get any marks for putting the advantages. So you must read the question. Very often a question like that will be followed by the next one, which say what are the advantages. But if it says disadvantages, put the disadvantages, because the examiner will have a mark scheme and it will have a list of disadvantages that you could put. There won't be any advantages on that. So don't waste your time putting advantages if it's asked you for the disadvantages.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yep. Looking at the student weaknesses, and what comes up time and time again, this is from the chief examiner, what comes up time and time again is giving a superficial answer. So if you're going to get 24 marks for a particular task, you won't get them by putting one sentence. At the same time, the examiner won't have time to read a novel. So if you've written 3 pages worth of your answer, it's far too long. This is again coming down to the planning bit, that you've got to plan what you're going to write. I can't emphasize that strongly enough. Plan what you're going to write.
I think also, Alan, the time limit we've mentioned earlier.
Yes.
The time is really the key indicator for you while you're progressing and answering these tasks. Is that if they say spend 30 minutes, it's going to be substantial. If it's 40 to 45, maybe a little bit more in-depth answer is required. Same principle, keep applying it to the question and the learning outcome, making sure that you're not repeating what you've already answered, in another area, and keep it succinct, relevant, structured, all the things we've gone over in all the previous questions. It's that planning, understanding the scenario, the pre-release material, and having an idea in your head, that if you've got a weakness, maybe writing isn't your thing. That's what most students tell me. Well, unfortunately, it has to be your thing. With the synoptic, it's not as important as it was in the current AQ 213 standards with a 5,000 word report. But you still have to, write a reasonable sentence with a full stop and a capital letter. I don't think the marking is as strict on spelling and grammar. I think it has to be understandable, and that's where your structure comes in. Okay.
I'm just looking at the student weaknesses that the examiners found again. No explanation of the figures. Never just stick down, well, unless it's a question which says, calculate this, that, or the other. When you're doing the extended writing task, never put down a figure. Never put down it so superficial that this is better than last year. That doesn't tell us anything. You don't need to have studied anything to find out that, 60% is better than last year's 50%. We know that. What we're looking for is, why has it gone up? Why do you think it's gone up? What have we done to make it be better? Or 60% might be worse than last year. You might have to compare it with the standard ratio. You may well have to compare. So why is it better? What have we done to make it better? Insufficient, this is the other way around, insufficient calculations to support the responses. So if you've got your evaluate, okay, you said this is good and that's bad, but why? What evidence have you got to support that this is good and that's bad? Is there a calculation? I go back to the finding out productivity. Are we more productive? Are we more efficient? Is that good? Is it bad? Why is it good? Why are we more efficient? If it's not efficient enough, how can we make it more efficient? So make sure that if you're going to put a calculation in, which is a good thing in your extended writing task, that you finish up by saying that it's why it's good. Make sure that you support your calculations with whatever it is you're going to write. The other one that students have been found to be weak on was saying, yeah, so in the end, I decided that it would be a good idea. Well, why? Why would it be a good idea? What have you based on that? Presumably, you've written all the good points, you've written all the bad points. Why did you come out one way or the other? What made you decide that the good points outweighed the bad points? So it's a matter of, one, it's a matter of exam technique, and it's also a matter of looking at this synoptic in a different way to what you did when you did the individual units.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
On that one.
Spend 20 to 25 minutes on question 4. Right, question 5. Those are the learning outcomes. Interpret. I don't think we've had that one before.
No.
Interpret.
No.
That means you've got to look at the figures and say what they mean. That is another thing to keep in mind, is who are you writing to? So if you're writing to another accountant, you may well be able to say, okay, Rocky was not very good. If you're writing to, what should we say, somebody, a potential investor who isn't necessarily an accountant, okay, they probably won't know what Rocky means. I perhaps haven't used the best example there, but you get what I mean. Make sure that you direct your answer to whoever it says that you should be directing it to.
Yeah, appropriate audience. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you've got a client, if you were in a private practice and you've got a client who comes to you and says, okay, I don't know whether I've done very well this year or not. It says I've made all this profit, but I haven't got a lot of cash in there. Then you wouldn't start saying, well, the gearing ratio is this, and the return on interest is that, and your acid ratio is this, because they wouldn't have a clue what you were talking about. If you want to use those, explain what they mean.
Yeah, they're the weaknesses that are actually highlighted in this particular task, that the indicators didn't measure efficiency and productivity.
Well, it's not only they didn't measure, the student didn't know what efficiency and productivity were.
Yeah, and deciding what affects gearing, they were weaknesses. It was lack of that knowledge, wasn't it?
This is what I've said before. Yeah. What affects gearing? It's all very well to say that the gearing is such and such, but why is it such and such? What factors go into making that gearing like that? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Spend 20 to 25 minutes on this task. And the final task, you can see there's quite a lot in there. Look at the problems from all angles, financial and non-financial. Like we did a long time, it seems a long time ago, when we started, I said, if you open up your corner shop next to Tesco's, it may be very well that you've got projected earnings of such and such, because you've compared it to the village shop that you used to live in. But if you're next to Tesco's, you've got to actually make sure that it's different. You've got to produce something that people want that they can't get from Tesco's. It may well be an extra, a really good product that you're doing. It may well be, you can give them a better meat counter or vegetable counter than Tesco's can. And it may well be that you could make a profit from opening up to Tesco's. So look at it from all angles. It's not just on the figures, it's what other things. If we go back to our the analogy I made at the beginning of whether I should go to the beach. Okay, you've based it on your weather forecast, but are there other things that would stop you or encourage you to go to the beach? Weaknesses. Insufficient detail. Right, so if you're going to talk about the acid test, then do make sure that you explain what the acid test is and make sure you know what goes into it. Why is the acid test as it is? Why is the acid test better than the current ratio? What, or worse, or why should you use both, or whatever it is that you need to do.
Yeah, I'd like to make another comment here before we draw on the conclusion. If you go into the synoptic exam and you've completed all your other mandatory units successfully, it's more than likely that you're going to have all the skills and knowledge that you need to answer all these questions, in the synoptic. I'd like to think that we've given you some food for thought in the analogies that Alan's mentioned and in how you can gain marks and how you can lose marks. And I think when Alan goes through the conclusion, it really just does sum up that it's preparation, it's doing all the mandatory units. Don't just think because this window has come up that suits you that you're going to go in and sit it, because I wouldn't do that. Make sure that you've got all your other units. You'll be equipped then with the knowledge in the the full range of the requirements of the synoptic assessment, and you should pass.
From what I gather from students, there is a lot of fear of the synoptic. I think the fear stems from the fact that it's not the same as what you've been used to. So if you go into this exam with the right frame of mind, then you're going to do really well. I always bring up my own experience when I was at university. It was in the days before the internet, so that'll tell you how old I am. And we were given a topic, and everybody rushed to the library afterwards to get all the books out. And being a little green in those days, I didn't manage to get to the library in time, and all the books had gone. So I thought, what am I going to do? And I looked at the question and I thought, well, I might be able to answer that without any books. So I put my own ideas and my own interpretation on the question, and it was the one and only time I got an A+ for any piece of work that I did at university. So look at it from a different way. Your answers aren't in the books. You've got to know the stuff in the books, obviously, but the direct answer isn't in the books. Put your own interpretation on it. There are no right answers. If you come up with a different decision to what the examiner's got on his mark sheet, but you've made a good statement, you've made a good piece of evidence for saying differently, then you'll get the marks for it. I have to say that they'd probably be so one-sided in the assessment that it's unlikely, but don't forget, it's what you have seen in this synoptic. So don't be frightened of putting your own ideas.
Yeah, can I take them back to what I said earlier? Use your own skills and knowledge, in the job that you're in. It doesn't matter really what the job is. Whatever we do, has to be efficient, productive, cost effective, etc., etc. So, think about what you're writing and put yourself in that scenario. It will make the job a lot easier. And as Alan said, the fear factor, there's been an awful lot of bad press for years on the old format of the written report. And it's all about preparation and planning, being structured and organised. And because you've got the pre-release material, that in my mind, is a great plus for you, because you're not going into an unknown. There isn't that much information to take in, and you can review it on the day. So brush up on the areas that maybe you're not very good at, that you don't really understand. And as long as you know the difference between writing state, a one-liner, a bullet point, in difference to analyse, demonstrate, evaluate, explain, that's where you do have to write, a sentence or a paragraph. So that will keep you on track with the time, and it will also take that fear factor that Alan mentioned about listening to what other people have said, how hard these exams are. It's completing all the coursework, not necessarily thinking that you can regurgitate what's from the book. The book's there for advice, but your own ability and knowledge and understanding will gain you a lot more marks than trying to do it parrot fashion, where it hasn't got any flow.
Yeah, I think if you go into this exam in the right frame of mind, then it's actually something that's easier than the individual units. The individual units will ask you difficult questions on how do you calculate this? Why did you use that? And that will show you that will test the depth of your knowledge. If you come up, like I've said, okay, well, I've thrown the books out the window, I've already done the depth. What does this tell me? This scenario, if I was in this position, would I want to tell my managing director that they should buy this piece of machinery? Why would they want to build? Okay, I've done all the financial things, and it says we can afford it, but is that the only thing? Do we actually need it? Are we going to continue with this product? Does this product have a future, or is there something going to supersede it?
And do the benefits gained outweigh the costs that will be incurred? There's that to consider as well, and that does come into it.
But you see, that, as I said, that's not in the book. That comes from common sense.
Yeah.
So, as long as you've got common sense, and I assume that everybody who's gone this far has got to have some common sense, then this is a lot easier, because there are no right and wrong answers. There are just good answers and not so good answers.
And good responses, even if they may be not what we call model answers, if they are a reasonable alternative an examiner will award maybe not full marks, but he will award marks, which could be the difference between a pass and a fail.
Oh, yes, certainly write something. Don't just say I don't know.
No. That's
write
very
something.
important.
It is, yes.
Yeah, very.
Yes. Right, I'm conscious we're coming up to about an hour, so let's just go through the conclusions. Right, I assume that everybody that's doing the synoptic this time has already successfully completed the mandatory units. That's the budgeting, the decision control and the financial statements. You won't get very far if you haven't studied those. Make sure you give prominence to the ASYC, the Accounting Systems and Controls unit. You may well say, okay, well, I've done those three. I've got to study those first three units. Okay, the accounting, yeah, okay, I've seen that. Don't do it like that. If anything, do it the other way around. Make sure you spend your time doing the Accounting Systems and Controls unit and leave the other unit. You've already done those anyway. You know what's in them. Don't write the first thing that comes into your head. That's a sure way to make sure, one, that it's a load of waffle, two, that you write a lot of things that you don't really need to write, and three, that the examiner won't give you many marks for. What you need to do is, I've said it before and I'll say it again, collect your ideas, select your ideas, and then organise your ideas. Make a note of the format. The report should be in report format. Email should look like an email. A letter should be full. Make sure that you know things like, if it's a letter, that if you start Dear Sir, that you've got to finish yours faithfully, not yours sincerely. Things like that. You won't lose many marks for that, but just make sure that you know what you're supposed to be doing, which, as I've said earlier, comes from your level 2 studies. That sounds a bit obvious, but make sure you're not answering a question that you thought it asked. Read the question twice. Does it actually ask me to explain, or does it ask me to state? Am I supposed to give a conclusion? I know there was I marked somebody's work the other day which asked them about a code of conduct, and they gave me a great long spiel on confidentiality. Now, the spiel on confidentiality was wonderful. It was absolutely spot on, but it didn't mention the code of conduct. So, you know, there was no marks for it. Make it relevant. There may be one or two questions where you can just give a general answer, but on the whole, this is a scenario. We want to know how you apply the knowledge that you've already got to this scenario. That's what the whole thing is about. So if you just make general comments throughout, you won't get very many marks. Right, I've done a lot of talking. So has anybody got any questions? I'm sure I haven't been looking very closely at the questions because I'm sure Sam has been doing a grand job in answering the questions that you've got. But if there's anything you'd want to ask me or Kay, then I can't promise that we know all the answers, but we can try. Maybe Sam's answered all your questions, or maybe you fell asleep after 5 minutes. I'm not sure which.
Can I just make a final point here? I've been marking these reports in the AQ 213, 10 standards, and prior to 2010 standards, and I get many variations on a theme. I have the projects that are too low on words, and I have to ask students to expand on. I get the other end of the spectrum. The limit currently is a minimum of 5,000 words. I've had to read reports that have had 25,000 words, and that's been excluding the appendices. So I say to all my students, if your boss asks you to do something, what do you do? Do you write, if he asks you to write a report and to keep it fairly short, do you write 15,000 words? No. In accountancy, it's very important that you keep to the facts, that you answer the questions, you do exactly what's expected of you in the accountancy principles, accounting regulations, compliance, etc., etc. So I hope that helps, because at least with the Synoptic, you don't even have to write anywhere near 5,000 words. You've got no appendices to do. So in my view, it should be a walk in the park.
Yeah, John has just asked what type of questions will you get on the mandatory units. You may well get a question which says you might have to do some ratios, or you may have to explain the reporting regulations. But if you're asked, let's stick on the ratios because they're easy to explain. You may have to calculate the ratios, which you had to do in the mandatory units. But here you'll have to explain why they're relevant.
Yeah.
What is it that you're using these ratios for? What do they mean?
Yeah, the emphasis is on the written word in this particular area of the Synoptic. So all those other skills are there, but they're quite, not basic, but they are not as extensive as the the written word, because they expect you to be able to give a reasonable assumption or a summing up, a conclusion which matches your calculations.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's bound to be a question on costing. One thing that it probably may well ask is, what kind of costing would be better in this situation? What costing method may well be better? So you need to know all the costing methods, but you need to know why one would be used. Why would marginal costing be better than absorption costing, and why might ABC costing be better than marginal costing? So it's you need to do the calculations and explain why you've done the calculations and how they're relevant. What aspects of ASYC would you say are the most important part to make sure we know in detail and understand? Types of internal control, types of effects, fraud, ratio analysis.
It depends on the question, doesn't it, really?
Yes. You can't just say, right, well, I should read chapters 4 and 5 of your whatever book you've got for your ASYC. Because that will come up. Any of it might come up, and the bits that you spent longest on may not come up at all.
I would suggest, as we said earlier, keep it to the information in the scenario.
Yes.
What knowledge you've got on calculations from your prior units, and look at the time factor, because that's your performance indicator on, what you've got to produce. And because we don't have pre-released material to how the examiner is going to mark, we've got a rough idea, but it's not quite the same as being able to say you will come up against this or you will come up against that, because at the moment, it's the learning outcomes, isn't it?
Yes, the accounting systems and controls part of the topics within that give you an idea of what it is, the approach you've got to have towards these answers that you're going to give in your Synoptic. So it's not just a matter of saying, right, okay, well, I've spotted these weaknesses, so when the Synoptic comes up, I'll put these weaknesses down. It's the fact that you've analysed what the weaknesses might be here, and these are the weaknesses in this situation. You no doubt you'll have to have some kind of cost benefit. There might be, very possibly, will be a cost benefit question.
Yeah, I think what I would suggest as well is that if you do your practice materials, and you particularly a mock, and use the AAT resources, as long as with your providers' resources alongside, you're going to get a good feel, for what you need to do. But I can remember I attended the conference, and it was quite apparent that the AAT are making sure, because this material is pre-released, that it will not necessarily be, there will be different variations on a theme. So it's very difficult for us, to be specific. So I would always keep to the scenario, make sure you do not overstudy, because you don't need to. You need to do the outline, do at least a mock when you've done your read your materials, and definitely do some practice work on the AAT resources. And if you've got any weak areas and they're weak, just do a little bit of practice and maybe get some help from your tutor or another colleague or mentor.
Yeah, don't get hung up on the questions that come from the budgeting or whatever.
No, or the other units.
You have covered those. They've tested those in depth. Now we're looking at how you would use them. Why is why is this budget a good idea? Why have we made these assumptions? What assumptions are in the budget? Are they valid assumptions?
Yeah, are they cost effective?
Yeah.
Are they reasonable? Because you could you could give an answer that you've not really read the scenario, the pre-release material sufficiently, write a lot of information, and if you've misinterpreted the question, you're going to lose marks. And I would think that's what happens, because everyone under an exam condition is going to be slightly apprehensive. So, plenty of time, don't rush at it. Plan, as Alan has said earlier, and follow all the, course outline and practice materials that you've got, and give yourself plenty of time before you enter for the synoptic.
Right. Well, I'm not sure if this has been an awesome webinar, as I said at the beginning. I hope it's been informative. I hope it's given you a different outlook on what to do. Please don't go in with trepidation.
No, be positive.
Yes.
Be positive.
Your ideas are as valid as anybody else's, and probably to the examiner, they're more valid than anybody else's.
And you don't get to the point of the last, assessment exam without having that prior knowledge. So if you've had good grades previously, there's no reason why you should go in with trepidation. You should go in with a really positive outlook and give it your best shot.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not just a matter of giving your best shot. You're going to do well. Yeah. Everybody is going to do well. We know that because you've listened to this awesome webinar. And you know now what it is that you're going to
and
face.
They can read and digest further if they get it from their it's released, isn't it, afterwards for our students?
Yes, yeah. So you can so week after next, don't over study. That's another thing. You can over study. If you go into an assessment centre, there are certain things you don't do. You don't discuss the questions with other candidates beforehand, because for one reason or other you find that some candidates know more about what's going to be in it than anybody else. And quite honestly, only the person that set the assessment knows what's going to be in it. So don't listen to them. When you come out, don't discuss it as well. Another little anecdote that I had. I came out of an exam and everybody said, "What did you get for answer number 6, whatever it was?" And I was the only one who didn't get that answer. And when the results came out, I was the only one that was right. So we want
go
your
with that.
ideas.
Go with that instinct.
Yes, that's
because
right, yes.
Normally you will be right, and that negativity creeps in if you read sort of negative feedback, or as you say, you discuss it with other people. If you're prepared, you've done your homework, you've not overstudied, you keep that positive frame of mind, it should be relatively straightforward. Right.
Well, I'm sure everybody's tired of listening to my voice at the moment. So, all the students, all the people who enrol, if that's the right word, do you enrol on the webinar? I don't know. Will be sent a link so that you can look at this back at your leisure. How many people would want to do that, I don't know. listening to my voice for an hour might well turn you off. But anyway, it's there if you want it. If you've got any questions, if you're Premier Training students, then, give your tutor a call. If you're not Premier Training students, then still give your tutor a call if you need to know anything else. But I hope, whether you're Premier Training students or not, I hope you all do really well in this upcoming
just about to say that. Yeah, good luck for everyone that's got this pending, that's booked.
Yes.
And I hope our presentation tonight has given you some food for thought, and certain things will stay in your mind to help you to really do a good job of your exam and pass.
Yeah, I'm sure you all will. As long as you go in with the right attitude, you'll do well. Right, I'll shut up now because you've fed up with me now. Thank you ever so much for what do you do? Do you register? Thank you very much for registering here, and we hope it's been useful.